we have Richard Brumberg, and our title is Educational Interpreter. I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to put myself on mute. I'm going to take notes because I know we're going to learn a lot this hour. Richard, welcome to the CEU ASL radio show.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's a real honor to be a part of this endeavor. I've listened to some of the CEUs in the past, and I just really feel really lucky that I was picked as well. So the topic of my presentation is boundary issues in educational interpreting. Where and how do you draw the line? And so, just to get things started, what I want you to do is think about a elementary school classroom. And if you think about it, there's a teacher, obviously class teacher. There are hearing students, and then in comes a new student who is deaf and uses ASL and has the culture. And so, along with this comes this extra adult who gives this title of educational interpreter. And as soon as you put an interpreter into that classroom, if there's no preparation, if there's no understanding of what the interpreter's role is, and what it is, what his or her role is compared to the teacher, or how the interpreter is going to be a part of this classroom environment, part of this culture, it can lead to a lot of confusion. And so, and this also can be confusing for us, for those of us who are the educational interpreters. Now, I'd like to tell you, first of all, the questions that the interpreter will start thinking about are, what's my role in the classroom? How do I explain my role to others? And most importantly, how do I maintain both boundaries and rapport with the other people in this environment? Now, I'd like to tell you that for most of my interpreting career, I've been involved in educational settings, primarily kindergarten, pre-kindergarten to high school, and some college as well. But what we're focusing here on is the public school setting. And I've worked both as a full-time staff interpreter. I worked as a full-time interpreter through an agency. I work as a community-based interpreter, but I do a majority of my assignments are in the school system. So I do a lot of substitute interpreting. So I am always faced with these questions that I'm presenting to you in this presentation. And really the genesis of this presentation, this workshop, comes from an event that took place a number of years ago here where I live in Atlanta, Georgia. We had a symposium, and we had deaf consumers, adults. We had a deaf moderator, and we also had seasoned sign language interpreters, ASL English interpreters. And at some point, I should also say, this whole thing was conducted in ASL. So, I can't really show you, but I can probably gloss for you sort of what they said. At some point, one interpreter said, it's really important that you, as a interpreter, you maintain boundaries with the deaf consumer, the deaf person that you're working with. And so the sign they used for boundary was like, draw the line, put the line right in front of you in space, or the other sign they used for limit. So limit. And then about 10 minutes later, another person on our panel said, it's really important that when you're at an assignment, that you maintain a good rapport with the people that you're working with, the deaf people and the hearing people. And they use the sign for rapport, which is like the sign for make a connection, back and forth. And that puzzled me. How could you have boundaries and have a rapport? And yet I knew inside that I had signed both. I had signed both when I was a young up-and-coming interpreter, and I hadn't thought about that sort of dichotomy. And was there a way to resolve both these things? And that's where I came up with the idea for this workshop, and what I started looking into, and when I started talking to other educational interpreters about some of the struggles and confusion that they had working in the classrooms. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about four things. We're going to give ourselves a general idea of what boundaries are, what's the definition in our everyday life, what boundaries means. Then we're going to look a little bit about the difference between boundaries and standards. And then we're going to talk about the boundary, if there is, where do we draw the line? Where is that line drawn? Is it drawn between the teacher and the deaf student? Is it between the student and the interpreter? We'll get to that. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about, once you have a decision, once you know what your role is, how are you then going to explain it to others? And that's the language in action. So what are you actually going to say in English to the teacher, to the principal, to the coach, to the classmates, and then the other hearing students? And we're talking from all the way from full 5-year-olds all the way through high school. And we're also talking about how are you going to sign in ASL? How are you going to explain your role to deaf teachers, to deaf staff, to deaf students? And again, deaf students all the way from little preschooler kids all the way through high school. So let's first talk about what a boundary is. And if you look in the dictionary, there's really two meanings there are two meanings of a boundary. One is border. It's kind of like drawing the line in the sign, like drawing a line in sand. And it's the official line that divides one area of land from another. And the other is limit. That's the other sign I talked about. Limit. The point at which something ends or beyond which it becomes something else. So if you think of an example, if you take, for example, the U.S. map, there is a distinct boundary between, say, the state of Texas and the state of New Mexico. So there's a point where once you cross over that line, you're in another state. You're in another territory. And what's interesting is just here I'm looking at I have my own PowerPoint, so I'm looking at the map. Is if you ever look at the U.S. map, what's interesting about boundaries is there are really two kinds. Some of them are natural. So if you look in the East Coast boundary is natural because of the way because of the way the coastline was set. So that has a natural order to it. The further west you go, you look at the boundaries, they're all like these square shapes, a lot of geometric shapes, and those are regimented for many different reasons by people. And also, the thing to notice is that they're agreed upon. We agree that that's going to be the boundaries. And no matter how close we get to the boundary, the border in Texas, we're still in Texas. So, and of course, we're thinking about our boundaries a negative thing. Our boundaries negative. Well, say for another example might be a soccer game. So if you think about a soccer game, the soccer field, it's regulated by all the lines, where the goalies are, where the dividing lines are, where one team's supposed to be and where the other team's supposed to be, and there's a big border around so you know where the playing field is. Well, what if you had the game and there was no line? If there were no boundaries, what would happen? You'd have complete chaos. No one would know where the goal was. No one would know where it was safe to stand. The spectators wouldn't know where to stand. You'd have no order. You'd have no boundaries, no goals, basically you wouldn't have any game. You have a field of, you'd have a big field of grass. And that's what happens if you don't set boundaries or agreed upon boundaries in a classroom. If you don't understand what everyone's role is, then you are potentially having chaos. And still, another example would be if you look on the divided highway. So if you look on an American divided highway, and there are different kinds of borders. So if you look on like an interstate, there are some that are special cases. So like the shoulder is a breakdown lane. So sometimes you can cross and go in your car. You can cross over. Sometimes, if you're having a breakdown, that's a special gift. Others are like dotted lines. So if you want to change lanes if you're going, say, heading east, and you change from the left lane to the center lane to the exit lane, then you can go across. So dotted lines, you can do that always. And then, of course, there's the divider. And the divider is that median, and you can never cross over that. That's something you can't cross over that. Well, like if you could, but of course, again, what you'd be doing is you'd be causing an accident. And again, think about that. The idea of it is that everyone agrees upon that. So as I'm looking at this picture, this is an American highway. So if I was in, say, England, this whole scenario would be wrong. Everything would have to be in the other direction. Everyone would have to be coming in on the left. The cars going away would be on the left-hand side, and that would be an agreed upon, a different kind of. They have their own system. They have their own boundaries. They have their own agreements. So you can also think of other examples in your everyday life and just something to think about. Think about an example like where you stand when someone's up at the ATM machine. If someone's at the ATM, normally you don't stand right behind them. Everyone tells you to stand in line. But if someone's at an ATM machine getting money out, you don't stand right behind them. There's actually a boundary. You have to stand physically the distance away from them. And it's agreed upon because there's a rule that says we don't want to invade on someone's privacy. Or think about this. If, again, it was a soccer game, if you were a referee standing in the field, let's say for some reason you're a referee and you're standing next to a goal. Can you kick the ball into the goal, score something for a team? You can't. Even if you're standing right next to the goal, your role boundary limits you or tells you, well, these are the things that I can do and things that are not within the boundaries of my role. And keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that image again later about the referee. Okay. So I started asking deaf adults who had been through mainstream settings, and I asked them questions about, how did you know that the interpreter was saying their role? How were you able to differentiate between interpreters and the teachers? How did you know who had what role? Because again, it's not just making sure you've set up the goals, the role and the boundaries. It's the person who's looking at the two roles and knowing the difference. So if I'm the deaf student, I need to be able to tell the difference between my teacher and my interpreter. So when I asked these adults, some of them said that the interpreter acts like the teacher, but not be the teacher, and through facial expressions and mannerisms. So that's an interesting example because what that's showing is someone showing through their through the language of American Sign Language, showing the role shifting of showing who's speaking and who's running the class. They can make by the hardcore interpreting, you can show who's talking and who is the one making decisions. And you can show that in your interpretation. The other example they said was that the interpreter has the boundary and ethics that what we said during the assignment would not be passed around the community. So that's the boundary between what can be said during the assignment and what you can discuss with the general public. And we're going to come back to that because that's a big issue with educational interpreters about what can I talk about. And that's part of defining what our role is. So here's something to think about, an example of something that's very simple. Entering a school, right? You think that would be really simple. There shouldn't be any problem. There should be nothing problematic with walking into a school, right? Let's think about this. Let's say that it's the first day of school, and you have already met the student, the deaf student who you'll be working with, and it's an example where it's a neighborhood school, so there's not there. It's not like a magnet school where a bunch of deaf students are at one school. It's this student's her neighborhood school, and so you both know each other. But this is the first time you're coming into the school together. You've met before school has started. So it's the first day of class. You get to the school, and let's say it's a sixth grade class. You both get to the door. The question is, who goes in first? And to make things more interesting, let's assume that the assistant principal of one of the assistant principals of the school is standing right inside. So what's it going to look like if, say, the interpreter walks in first and then the student walks in afterwards? What would it look like if the interpreter opens the door and then gestures for the deaf student to walk on in? What is it going to look like if they both walk in, but if they walk in at the same time, but they go through separate doors? What's the perception from the assistant principal's point of view? That's something really, really simple, but it can set up from their perspective, from the viewer's perspective, about what's the relationship between the interpreter and the student. And no, I'm not going to give an answer. what I would do. That's something for you to ponder. So in looking at these boundaries, I found that these boundaries seem to be about negatives, like what you can't do. What are my limits, right? Limits of, and like we said, it shouldn't really be. We really wouldn't want to think about that way because, like, that makes it feel limiting, right? So Leonard, in '96, wrote an article, and he talked about the difference between standards and boundaries. So the difference is that a boundary is what you've determined that other people or environments cannot do to you. So a boundary is a no. It's no, you can't do that. That's not your job. You're not supposed to be doing that. So it's a very much like, again, it's a limiting thing of don't get too friendly with me. That's something saying no, you can't do that. So that makes it a negative feel, right? A standard are the behaviors and excellence that you internally naturally hold yourself. It says naturally. I take it to mean internally hold yourself to. So, it's what your character is, right? It's how you behave when no one is around. There's no mysterious watchdog walking you. It's how you behave in the classroom. And it's about what I do as an interpreter, what I can do. So it's a listing. To me, it's more like the boundaries are no's and the standards are yes. This is what I'm going to do. The Code of Professional Conduct has standards, and it has standards helping me how to behave in helping me how to behave in certain standards in certain situations. Other examples, if you're in an educational setting, are school district policies, which are rules that you need to follow. So those can guide you with your standards. And of course, you can get even further above with state and national policies. But above all, the biggest standard, the biggest rule of any code, of any profession, is do no harm. That is the thing about most code, any code, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, interpreter, teacher, is do no harm. So let me give you an example of how you could list professional standards. If we were talking about student behaviors, okay, and by student behavior, what we're really talking is student misbehavior. So the student is acting up, hearing or deaf. A student in the classroom where the interpreter is assigned, there's a student acting up. So again, you're like the educational interpreters are like, what's my role? How am I supposed to respond to this? If I see something happening, I'm on staff with the school, right? Staff expect me to do this, expects me to get involved. The code of professional conduct is telling me I have to remain neutral. And so, just like in the article from Gina Olivia, if you have a chance, get the Street Leverage and read her article called "Sign Language Interpreters in Mainstream Classrooms: Heartbroken and Gagged." A fantastic article. But basically, her point is that interpreters feel this way. They feel like, what can I do? I feel like I see things happening in the classroom, and I don't know what my role is. I don't know what the limits are. I don't know what my standards are. So let's assume that you're going to come up with student behavior standards. It might look like this. The teacher deals with behaviors and discipline, period. So if there's misbehavior, the teacher is the one that doles out the punishment. The interpreter, whose role is supporting the teacher's goals, facilitate all the communication in the classroom. That's all the communication. So the kids talking to the kids, the teacher's talking to the kids, they're talking to the staff. Facilitate all the communication in the classroom. Obviously you can't do everything, but that's the goal. Reports behaviors to the teacher if it is disruptive to the interpreting process. So if what's happening is hindering you from interpreting, then you can say something about behavior, and you can say to the student, if a kid keeps walking in front of you, you can say to the student, "You're blocking my view, and I can't see. The deaf student can't see what I'm signing, nor can I see. I can't see that as well." But if it's continuous, you can tell the teacher about that. And it's not tattletaling because it's hindering you from doing your primary job. And, okay, here's the thing. Willing to lend a hand in an outright emergency. If I'll give you an example. I was interpreting in a upper elementary classroom, and I just happened to look over, and I saw a kid. He had his hand out, and he had the scissors, and he was using the scissors to jump over each of his fingers. Right? And so this is what I did as a professional. I said, "Hey, stop that. Hey, you're going to hurt yourself." And all I had to do was say that, and the teacher took care of the rest. But, people are human first. And so if part of your standard is, again, the biggest role is do no harm. Are you actually going to let a kid hurt himself, hearing or deaf, if he's doing that without at least saying something? whatever these standards are, when you first work them out, you need to work them out with the teacher separately. So this is something that cannot be done on the fly. It needs to be done separately. So when you go and you meet the teacher for the first time, you can talk about these kind of things. And you may be with a class and teacher that hasn't thought about these things before, and so you can start giving examples. And again, later on, we're going to talk about how you can talk about those things. The other thing is for the student behavior for the standard practice, is that it has to be followed consistently by all the teachers and all the interpreters in the school. So if you're on a team with interpreters, you really need to work out with the other interpreters. What are we going to do as a team? And then be able to say that to the teachers. Again, you can't have half the people thinking that they're in New Mexico and half the people thinking that they're in Texas. The boundary, the standard has to be agreed upon. Because what happens is, if you're aren't careful, the boundaries are going to strangle you and make you feel like you're dead, but you can't do anything. And if you do that, the person is going to be lost within a standard or a boundary. If they're hindering you from the overall goals, then it's the student who's going to lose out. In particular, the deaf student, but all the students are going to lose out. The class and community is going to lose out. So the example is the standard from the CPC, which is interpreters adhere to the standards of confidential communication. So, like I said, here's the problem. How do I deal with all this? How do I deal with this information? Who can I share with? Am I supposed to keep all this information to myself when I'm also trying to be a part of this team? I've got the teacher, the classroom teacher, the teacher of the deaf, the principal, guidance counselor. Think of all the people who could show up at, say, at an IEP meeting. Those are all people that want to know what's going on in the progress of this student. So, how do you feel? How do you share information when you're stuck with the idea of confidentiality? If you think about confidentiality, historically, it's been signed like put your finger to your lips, close up your mouth, say or sign like you can sign say nothing. So it's all about so that idea is like I'm keeping everything inside. I'm not going to say everything. So it's like for my eyes only, right? But Robin Dean and Robert Pollard in Views wrote an article, and they said, and they were talking about medical interpreting and case conferencing, and what they said was, look at the base word of confidentiality, and the base word is confide. And that means to tell someone something in confidence, right? So if I'm going to share this with you, and I trust that you're going to know who to tell. So like the deaf adult was saying, they knew the boundary of, let's say I'm going away, and I know a substitute interpreter is coming, I need to be able to to be able to leave notes for the substitute interpreter to confide that, and I know that interpreter is not going to spread it around to anyone else. They're going to know that the reason why I told this interpreter is so that they can keep things consistent. See what I mean? If you want to keep the standards consistent, then you need to be able to share what those standards are with someone who's coming in. And that's what I mean by balancing the standards and the boundaries. One second here. And here's something else. When you meet with the teacher, when something does go awry, you may think, like I said, we want to make sure that we're preparing ourselves for things that are going to happen before they do, right? So, but sometimes things happen, things come up. Like I said, that kid with the scissors, or another example would be the deaf student asking the interpreter for help, and not the teacher, and there being some confusion about that. So, if you could do something within the interpretation to show what the role is, that's the least intrusive. Sometimes you know what's coming, and so you can do it before the interpretation. Like we talked about behaviors. I know that that's going to come up about behaviors, so I talk to classroom teachers about, let's figure out what we're going to do when a behavior comes up. Let's figure out what we're going to do when it's time to line up. Let me tell you what it's going to look like. This may never happen, but it may. What happens if we have a team interpreting? If you have two interpreters coming, what would that mean to two interpreters? What's it going to be like if there's a teacher to deaf there as well? What are our roles going to be? That's before an interpretation. If for some reason something goes on, and there's a time for repair, and you can't do it during the interpretation, sometimes you feel like after the interpretation is, oh, it's too late. Why am I doing this now? Well, the reason why you're doing after the interpretation, why you do that debriefing, why you talk to the teacher again, is because you're really preparing yourself for the next time that you interpret. And this was an idea that I learned from Austin Andrews, but I think it's a very I find it very freeing, because now you don't feel like you've missed the boat. What you're doing is you're preparing yourself. You're able to clarify your role better for the next time. The next day you walk in the classroom, and then you'll know that could come up, and you'll be able to talk about that for the next school year, or if there's a new teacher. So let's get to where the boundary is. Where does the thickest boundary lie? Is it between the student and the classroom teacher? Is it between the student and the interpreter? Is it between the classroom teacher and the interpreter? And what I found in doing my research and looking at how interpreters do themselves, that the boundary is really not between the interpreter and the student, as we've seen at sign. Really, the boundary is between the classroom teacher and the interpreter. And what interpreters feel when they get that little alarm going off in their stomach, in the back of their head, they get that alarm going off of, I shouldn't be doing this, is really because they think it's a violation of what their standards are. It's a violation of it goes against what they think an interpreter should be doing this. And that's why they think it's a limit. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not supposed to do that. So let me give you an analogy. Let's say you're at the doctor's office. You've gone through, you've had your checkup, and you say, you're ready to pay your bill. So you hand your credit card to the doctor. The doctor will probably say, no, actually, you go over to the front desk, and they'll pay, and they'll take care of the billing for you. So, and even if, let's say, you're walking out of the doctor's office, and you're heading in the hallway, you try to give the credit card to the doctor, most times the doctor's going to say, you can let the billing office take care of that. So, even though, that person's right next to the credit card machine, most of the time the doctor will say, let the office manager take care of that, because that's their job. And it's not that I'm not saying that it's below me. I'm just saying that I have other responsibilities. I have other standards that I follow, and if I do this, I'm taking away the role of this other person. So they're both adults. They both could do it. Just like when you're in a classroom and the teacher looks at you and you walk in, and the teacher thinks, oh, look, another adult. I can now leave the classroom and leave you in charge of the class. While I go and I'll run to the bathroom. And so the question is, that's the way you start getting a little, wait a second, no, wait, I'm supposed to watch the class while you go, and I thought that was your role. So that's where interpreters feel, that's where you crossed over the boundary. That's where you cross over the line of what someone's standards are. So let's think about some examples. I've named some, but here's some more examples of where an interpreter may feel that sort of thing of violation of the boundary. Let's say it's a classroom and it's a planet. They're reviewing planets. So the classes learn about it, and so the teacher gives out a review sheet. And the student looks at the interpreter and spells out the word Gravity and signs what mean. So what does Gravity, what does gravity mean? On a review sheet. So, ask the interpreter, and the interpreter is going to think, wait a second, why are you asking me? Even if it seems like what we're doing is an interpretation, but think about what would happen if I give the answer. If I give the answer, I explain what it means on a review sheet. Now, I'm going against the goal of what the teacher wants. The teacher is trying to figure out, does the student understand what the word means? And that's a whole other topic about literacy and how you manage that. But this case is about the role. What's the role of the interpreter at this point? And how are you going to handle saying to the student, getting the student to ask the question to the teacher? But this works for the hearing people at the school as well. So let's say you are in the faculty room and the principal, someone in administration walks up and says, so what is Susan's reading level? Asking about deaf student. And they ask, what's Susan's reading level? And you say, uh-oh. And so this is a scenario that I was talking before. The reason why that adult is asking you is probably because they think, look, you're the person with that interpreter, with the deaf student all the time. You're always with that deaf student. You're next to him. Just like the referee is standing right next to the goal. He could kick the ball in. Just like the doctor is standing right next to the doctor machine. He could definitely swipe the card. It would be easier. It would be easier that way. Okay. Now, when I presented this, I've presented this a number of times as a live workshop, and one of the times I did it, someone was talking about, well, look, I just feel like I'm in the classroom, and I know this deaf student doesn't have exposure language. There aren't deaf adults, which is a totally different language. Deaf adults should be included. Obviously, should be in the classroom teaching. But where are the language models? And I know the student isn't getting if I just do straight interpreting, but I feel like I'm helping too much. Okay? So here's my view on that, about your role, about the boundary where you can set the limits for your role, what your standard is as an interpreter in school. If you find yourself doing some sort of expansion or you're finding time where there seems to be nothing going on, and you are just sort of reviewing a concept that you know needed more expansion, and all you're doing is reiterating what the teacher said. As long as you haven't changed the game, it's still interpreting. It may be an hour after what the teacher actually said, but if you're expanding upon that, it's still interpreting. If the student is reading from is reading directions from a test, it doesn't understand the directions, and it's time for a test, and it's part of their IEP, and you can interpret the directions. As long as you're not giving too much, as long as you're not changing the nature of the game and not changing the nature of what the teacher's goals are, it's still interpreting. It's kind of like you see little kids when they first go bowling, and they have the bumper bowls, right? So basically, it's the same game. You're just taking out the gutters. But what would it be like? Have you ever seen a game where bowling where the kid walks up to the bowling pins and knocks all the pins over? That would never happen. And the reason that won't happen is because that changes the nature of the game. You're not bowling with a ball, you're taking the pins down with your feet. So it's the same thing with interpreting. I can guarantee that there are lots of places where you may feel like, I hope this is part of my job. I hope this is part of my role. But I'm betting that most of the time, you would still be able to say it's interpreting. So now we're going to get to our last part, which is the language. And how do we make the language work?
Richard, actually?
Yes.
Richard, no, you're doing great. You're doing great on time. I just wanted to give you the 12-minute warning. You just said to wrap up. So you're doing great on time. Thank you. Let me go ahead and flip out some notes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I've got 12 minutes left, but I believe I can do it. So here we go with language and action and how to make it work. Okay? So in looking at how interpreters respond, we should be aware of the sign choices and word choices we're using. Of course, we're interpreters. We don't always think about what we actually sign. There are signs and words in English that when you say or sign them, they have a positive effect on the listener when you're responding. Others have a negative effect. They shut people down. And so the goal is, one of the tricks is to make yourself feel more empowered as an interpreter. The trick is to turn the empowerment back on the student and the teachers. Give them the power that they already have. Let them be the student. Let them be the teacher. And be able to show that you are being supportive. Not that you're trying to blow someone, to blow them off. So, for example, the ASL, some of the negative signs I've seen are the not my business sign. You know, the one where you're flicking your middle finger off your shoulders. Both middle finger off your shoulders, not my business. Which in English, to teachers, that's the one where you're saying, it's not my job. I'm just the interpreter. Other ones might be think self. So if the student says, what does this word mean? And you go, think self, not my business. You're on your own, kid. That's not going to, that's just going to, again, that's going to completely destroy the rapport. Others have a positive effect. And if you say I'm just the interpreter to a teacher, what they're going to hear is, what they're going to hear is, that's not my job. When we say I'm just the interpreter, what we mean is, the interpreting process is really, really complex. And for me if I teach at the same time when I'm interpreting, one of the two is going to get lost. It's like someone taking someone erasing the dotted lines off of the highway. I can't concentrate. It's very hard to be able to do both. Positive effect examples might be, for signs might be, me suggest, ask to teacher, and with a question, like, ask teacher. English words might be, I'd be happy to, start with I'd be happy to. Good word for, positive word for teachers is saying caseload. Teachers, if you can use the word that teachers use and administrators use and schools use, that's a big plus. Protocol, IEP is a big powerful word. It's a very big powerful word. And there are two examples where the sign, just happens the sign and the English have the same effect. So if you say things like, if you sign scenes, that's a much more gentle way. So, like, if a student asks you, what did the teacher mean? Or you could say, well, what's going on? You say, scenes, teacher, angry. Do you want to ask? So, instead of saying, if you sign, the teacher's angry, now you've made a judgment. But if you sign scenes, then you want to know what it looks like. And you're not really 100% sure. And that's the thing with here. Well, it seems that, blah, blah, blah. You're not ordering, you're saying, well, it seems like when I'm interpreting in social studies that the student seems to be more involved and asking me to interpret more than in science. That's an example. The one sign and English example that has a negative effect is the sign "step out from roll," and you'll see interpreters do this, and that's because they sign it and they say it at the same time, and they'll say, "I'm going to step out of my role as the interpreter to explain something." Okay, that absolutely doesn't make sense, because if I say I'm going to step, let's say I need to explain turn taking, that the classroom is going to, the speed of the conversation is going too fast, and the deaf student can't follow what's going on. Now, I know I need to get involved, because it's hindering my interpretation. But if I say, let me sit down in my role as the interpreter and explain what's going on, that would be like, if you're going in for surgery, and before you go in, the doctor comes in and says, okay, I'm going to step out of my role as a doctor, and now I'm going to explain to you the procedure. Right? That's not what we mean by step out role as the interpreter. What we mean is, let me stop interpreting, like let me stop the process of interpreting, and let me explain to you how to make it better. So you don't even need to say that. You could say, in a positive way, it seems like everyone's talking at once, and I think everyone will be able to hear each other a lot better if we all took turns. So, or you can also say, may I suggest that we all take turns? And then that empowers everyone. And again, for really young kids, they may not have the words to say that. And if they see it over and over again, then later they will be empowered to say, hey, I can't understand what everyone's saying because you're all talking and I don't know who to look at. And then that's when you can do it within the interpretation. That's when you can voice what the deaf student is saying. You see how I mean? That seems to be a lot smoother, and that the interpreting process is still going. So let me just give you some examples of what interpreters said when I asked them about those two examples that I shared with you. When the student asked gravity what mean, the interpreters I interviewed gave responses like, they signed, why not both of us ask teacher? And another one said, come along, ask to teacher, question mark? And then the third one said, hey, you raise hand, ask teacher, I admit, interpret. So that's like, hey, why don't you can raise your hand, ask teacher, and I don't mind interpreting. So And I looked at the words they picked. Why not? Which I thought was a great word choice. And that little question tag, the wiggly phone, that question tag, and then the admit. So I asked them, why did you pick those words? What? And she said, and the interpreter said, well, it's a gentle push out of the nest. And it's up to the student. If the student doesn't want to ask the teacher, I don't want to demand, which is exactly right. That's what I mean about having a standard. And in any one of those cases, you are not doing any harm. There's no harm there doesn't mean any harm. You're not taking over. All you're doing is giving a suggestion. And the answer they could say is, I don't ask, teacher. Okay. And you might want to try, maybe you could try for two of these. Maybe they don't understand the one way you're doing, so you try another way. But after a while, if you keep, again, if you keep suggesting, and they start to feel like it's becoming more of an order. So, again, you really want to balance that out. For the other scenario, to clarify what the role is, and notice now you're saying, this is not my role. This is not what I'm supposed to do. It's just how I'm going to respond. So if the teacher asks, the assistant principal asked the interpreter, hey, what's Susan's reading level? The response I got was, an example would be, I don't know, I'm only familiar with deaf students' interpreting needs, but the student is a part of Teacher to Deaf's caseload, and she would have that info for you. Do you know who the Teacher to Deaf is? Do you want me to introduce you to her? So, interpreting needs is a very powerful thing to say, and also caseload. That's a word that administrators pick up on and teachers pick up on really quickly because they have a lot of special education, a lot of kids who have IEP. There's always someone who's in charge of that person's caseload, and you would want to know who the person is. Because then you could say, I've done the work for you. I know who this person is, and I can definitely get you to that person. And I asked the interpreter, why did they say that? And they said, the goal is to guide the classroom teacher, or in this case, the administrator, to the appropriate person. You're teaching the teacher. But wait, I'm just the interpreter. Yes, that's part of being an interpreter. Part of being an interpreter is explaining this is that person's role, this is their standards, this is what they do, then they know who to ask. It's a question of finding out who to ask. The information is a way to be helpful for my coworkers. It fosters goodwill between the classroom teacher and the deaf hard of hearing department, and that's really, really important. Like I said, there has to be agreement between all the staff. This is how we're going to operate, and these kind of responses help that. So, in conclusion, I am not saying there's an easy way. I mean, it sounds simple. It's not easy. It's something you really have to work on. But if you really have your heart set on being in the school and helping the school with their goals, and particularly helping and supporting the goals for all the people in that classroom, I believe with this sort of approach that you'll be able to make a conducive environment for the deaf student, for the hearing students, for the teachers, and for yourself. And I now have 5 minutes left. Well, give me a minute to wrap it up. So 4 minutes left. Sure. So I just want to make sure that I got to everything. Yes, and I really do want to stress this again. One of the big keys that I've recently wanted to add on is that having that biggest boundary there only works when the person who's looking at it accepts it, right? So if I'm the driver, when I look down at the road, I accept what those boundaries are. If I'm I'm the administrator, if I'm the guidance counselor, and I walk in and I see the teacher's operating one way and the interpreter operating one way, as long as I know what those roles are, and it's clear to me, and I accept it, then the boundary is clear. But sometimes what happens is someone's going to walk in and they're not going to know what the boundaries are, and they're going to flub. So that's why, like I said, it's always a process, and you'll encounter this over and over again. But the great thing is that it's a process. You'll encounter this thing over and over again, and so you'll get better and better at dealing with these issues. And I deal with these issues all the time. So I think that I do recommend those articles that I talked about. They will give you some insight into where I was coming from, and I certainly do invite your questions, your responses. And I'm not sure that's not the key, but is there any way that will I be able to leave I'd be happy to leave my email, because I always enjoy getting responses from people and how they feel. And of course, this is a radio show, so I really want to know your responses, and I'm not getting it directly. See, there's a boundary right there. I don't have the immediate responses, so I have to work around that by saying, hey, email me and let me know what your feedback is.
So what was your email again?
My email is raslterp@yahoo.com. So it's raslterp.com. raslterp@yahoo.com.
Richard, I want to thank you so much for coming on here again tonight. Great topic. And you filled up a whole hour. As I was sitting here listening, I realized in the past when we used to do it on TogiNet Radio, we used to have breaks every 15 minutes. And so the other instructors actually only went like 40-45 minutes. So I just want to let you know, you set a new record, and you went a good 60 minutes. So thank you so much for coming on here. Absolutely. And let me wrap this up again. Thank our sponsors of this ASL radio show, hosting myself and Wink. Of course, ASLLegalShield.com, WinkASL.com, and also our new third person and support, Paula Browning, which I believe it's Interpreter Guild. I think it's interpreter-guild.com. I'm going to have to, I keep saying it wrong, Paula. I'm sorry. But again, thank you, Paula, for being there tonight. So now, interpreters, after listening to this, and what you're going to do now is you're going to go to our CEU sponsor and radio supporter. The website is www.ceusonthego.com. CEUsonthego.com, and then you're going to click on Purchase Online CEUs. After you do that, you're going to see a couple of choices there. Go to the click here for the Keith Wann show, CEUs, and the rest is self-explanatory. We have past issues. We have past CEU shows like Process That, what interpreters should know about the ADA, what interpreters should know about Islam, what interpreters should know about captioning, Ethics 101, your hearing and that's okay. And now the new edition from Richard Brumberg, Boundary Issues in Educational Interpreting. Once again, thank you very much, Richard.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on the train.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.